Hi everyone, I'm Kirsten Davidson, your host and creator of my wellness podcast, Mind the Gaps, surrendering our typical ways of looking at life to step out of our comfort zone and into our growth zone. Welcome to episode number 5, Blue Zone Living in Costa Rica. This past January, I went on a solo trip to Costa Rica as part of a yoga retreat. Costa Rica is categorized as a blue zone, and blue zones are regions in the world where people have exceptionally long lifespans. Regions where living to 100 and older is not uncommon. The 5 original blue zones are found in areas of Japan, Italy, Greece, California, and of course, Costa Rica. Today, I'll be discussing how the blue zone ways of life showed up on my journey and how these lifestyle factors don't have to be limited to 5 regions of the world. We have the power to bring them home, no matter where home is. To stay up to date on all things Mind the Gaps, you can find me on Instagram at kirsten.davidson. I'm always happy to respond to every single one of your questions, comments, and feedback. Most of all, I'm happy to have you as part of the Mind the Gaps community. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy. The retreat that I went on was led by certified yoga instructors Melanie Keynes and colleague Maria Hiller. I'm happy to share that Melanie will be joining me on the show later this year to talk more about travel, as she leads about 12 to 14 worldwide yoga retreats each year. I booked this trip with the sole intention to get out of my comfort zone, as I'd never traveled alone before. On the evening before my flight, I was reminded of my stepbrother telling me to make sure you soak up the now. Don't be stupid and miss what's right in front of you. I deleted social media from my phone and put everything on Do Not Disturb for the next 7 days into the jungle. On my first morning in Costa Rica, our group had an orientation meeting. At the end of her presentation, local orientation leader said, "Our one request of our guests is that you take our Blue Zone vibes home with you and you keep them with you for the rest of your lives." And that's exactly what I intend to do here as we mind the gaps between our typical lifestyles and what lifestyle factors might actually be better for us. So what are blue zones exactly? The term Blue Zones is a certification mark that was created by CEO Dan Buettner, Michael Poulain, and Giovanni Mario Pez. Some of you might know Dan from his Netflix docuseries called Live to 100, Secrets of the Blue Zones. He's an American National Geographic Fellow and best-selling author, and in 2004, he teamed up with some of the world's most esteemed longevity researchers, National Geographic, and the National Institute on Aging to find out why and how certain populations are living longer and with higher quality lives than most. As I was doing some research on the Blue Zones and reflecting on my own trip, I was excited when I discovered an important theme. Blue Zone residents share what I've been calling an "of course I can" mindset. In Western culture, when we and our peers hit a certain age, we tend to adopt an "of course I can't" mindset, a bias and stereotype of the elderly. When we see or become elderly citizens leading sedentary lifestyles, being stuck in their ways, stopping their knowledge acquisition, losing their memories or self-sufficiency, what do? We think, oh, of course they can't. Of course they can't cook their own meals, host a dinner party, ride a horse, remember my name. They're 70, 80, 90. Of course they can't do these things. In blue zones, citizens who are living close to and past 100 years old have more psychological and physiological vitality than most of us would aspire to even in middle age. And they're not just getting by, suffering or droning on through life. They're thriving and fulfilling their sense of purpose until their dying day. They get up out of bed and take care of themselves and others without any surprise that they still have the abilities to do so. Why wouldn't they? They believe they can, and so they do. They have an "of course I can" mindset. This got me thinking about a concept in psychology called self-fulfilling prophecies. I'd like to refer to a self-fulfilling prophecy as a fancier term for manifesting. This happens when our predictions come true based on the belief or expectation that they would come true. Countless research studies show that when we believe we're going to fail, we're more likely to fail. And if we believe we're going to thrive, we're more likely to thrive. American historian and philosopher Howard Zinn says, pessimism becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. It reproduces itself by crippling our willingness to act. With this in mind, it would make sense that our societal pessimism about aging might cause us to age faster, whereas in blue zones, the societal optimism about aging might be helping to prolong their lives. It's all about the story we choose to tell ourselves. When I was in Costa Rica, it was pretty empowering to observe the of course I can mindsets all around me, and to adopt one myself. One of my friends on the trip would say every morning, "Let's have another yes day." By this, she meant for us to keep seizing each day and saying yes to the things outside of our comfort zones that could propel us into growth. It seems as though Blue Zone residents spend more time in their growth zones than they do in their comfort zones. With the men and women in my retreat group ranging from our 20s to 70s, we said yes to trying everything from cold plunges and surfing to aerial yoga and releasing trauma in the body. Which leads me to one of the most important Blue Zone secrets in my opinion, and that is community and connection. When I originally booked this solo trip, I planned to be completely disconnected, not just from my phone, but from social interaction altogether. I planned to have time for myself uninterrupted by time spent with others. It's only now that I realize how wrong I was to be looking at social connection as a nuisance. I was humbled for having thought I was going to do this alone, when connections with other travelers came almost instantly, some only moments after landing, and all of them were far from an interruption. By the end of the week, I had experienced at least one meaningful connection with every single retreater, whether it was bonding over a shared interest, opening up to learning something new, sharing the quiet moments of a sunset, or the screaming howler monkeys in the morning. While I was blessed to share the company of everyone in my group, myself and 4 other women found ourselves in an unlikely friendship that I can now only imagine will last a lifetime. We each came from all different walks of life and all different ages, stretching from 26 to 76. So not only did I expect to be a lone wolf on this trip, the last thing I expected was to say that I now have a priceless friendship with a 76-year-old woman who I'd say is going on 56, and who lives only a few cities over from mine. By their requests to be name-dropped on a podcast, I'll tell you that these warrior women go by Laura, Carrie, Laurel, and Susan. Together, we shared moments of laughter, happy tears, sad tears, banter, trying and missing, trying and succeeding, making fun of each other, empowering each other, and ultimately letting go and falling into the now together. The ways in which each of us bared our souls to spark this connection is something we all express gratitude for. With nothing but pure surprise and thankfulness, Laura often points out how our group connection was unexpected yet instantly deep. Let's look at just how integral social support is to our human experience. In Dan Buettner's book called The Blue Zones, he references how loneliness can account for 15 years shaved off an individual's life expectancy. 15 years! Literature on social isolation has defined loneliness as a silent killer, since we're social by design and require a sense of belonging and safety, not only to thrive, but to survive. Listening to the sound of Costa Rica's native howler monkeys, I thought about the famous Harlow's monkeys experiment. In the late 1950s, psychology researcher Harry Harlow conducted a study where infant monkeys were reared in cages with surrogate mothers. Some surrogates were made of wire and some were made of cloth. The wire mothers had a bottle of formula attached to them, the monkey's only source of food, and the cloth ones did not have any formula. Repeatedly, the monkeys quickly latched onto their cloth mother for safety, even if it meant eating less food. The drive for connection and touch took priority over the drive for hunger. This is how important it is to feel like we belong. And so we've got to pay attention to not latch on to people who tear us down. To me, a quality relationship requires the courage to love someone and the courage to praise them for their triumphs, just as well as calling them out on their blind spots. I learned a new term on my trip that encapsulates this type of a person: an expander. Expanders are people who help others fulfill their maximum potential. In Mind the Gaps terms, expanders help other people get from their comfort zones to their growth zones. As American journalist Johan Hari says, home is when someone notices you're not there. Far away from home in Costa Rica, I felt at home. I noticed how people in the community and on retreat checked in with each other. They were genuinely curious about one another's lives and well-being, and I found myself feeling and doing the same thing. That anonymity that I was expecting on this trip was replaced by a profound sense of belonging, one that made me feel safe, accepted, and whole. And for all the times that I did spend adventuring and relaxing on my own, I think I enjoyed it even more knowing that I was never truly alone, that connection was all around me, there and back home. Now, our connection with others can only be as deep as our connection with ourselves, says American author and researcher Brené Brown. So while it's truly a matter of life or death who you surround yourself with, we can't forget that you are surrounded by you 24/7. You are your one everlasting social connection, so we better take care of our relationship with ourselves. In a conversation with one of my fellow retreaters, he said that when you're equally at peace amongst others as you are in your own company, you become, as quoted directly, unfuckwithable. One very important Blue Zone lifestyle factor for self-care involves paying attention to what foods we put into our body and how we go about doing this. We want to create environments for ourselves, unlike Harlow's monkeys, where we get to feel full and have social connection. In the Blue Zones, mealtimes are spent with family. They're a time to prepare, sit, and enjoy nourishment together, and not just with any food, with food that's been grown and harvested locally. Fast food and chain restaurants are only recently seeping into more central locations in Costa Rica, but deeper into their jungles, they're out of sight. In our busy, technology-driven, and individualistic societies, family mealtime is becoming more of a foreign concept, let alone growing our own food. The retreat center I stayed at challenged these norms. Everything was built around community and connection at mealtimes. The tables were long enough to sit 15 plus people at once, and the food itself was fresh, local, and nutrient-dense, contrasting the processed foods that most of us likely ate at the airport. Now, I could and likely will create a whole episode on what's called obesogenic environments. Obesogenic environments are those that propagate fast food brands selling meals high in sugar, salt, and fat. And unsurprisingly, these places have higher rates of obesity and mortality. But for now, I'll say that making changes to our eating behaviors is way easier in environments where there's little to no temptation, where our evolutionary drive to eat as much fat, salt, and sugar is not being preyed on by fast food industries. The buffet at the retreat center was far from any abundantly fried visual that comes to mind when you hear the word buffet. And because of this, because there was no temptation of fast food, everyone ate clean by default. The approach that Blue Zone citizens take to their diet is closely related to that of their medicine and healthcare. They take a proactive approach to well-being rather than a reactive one. By taking care of themselves and passing on these lifestyle factors to new generations, they are, as Dan Buettner says, not trying to prevent death, they're learning how to live. Everything we've covered so far on Blue Zones requires one very important rule, and that is to slow down. To take on the of course I can mindset, we have to make the time and then take the time to spend with community, with ourselves, and on activities that are proactively keeping us physically and mentally fit. My dad and I had a conversation a few months ago about sauntering. Sauntering, by definition, means to walk in a relaxed manner without hurry or effort. He shared that on a quiet afternoon, he enjoys the freedom of being able to saunter around a grocery store and really take his time making selections, contrasting the mad rush approach that most of us take when we're at the grocery store. Get in, get out, on to the next thing. I thought about this while I was in Costa Rica. If someone hasn't already done research on this, I'd bet that their time spent sauntering is exponentially higher than those of us living in the hustle and bustle of modern societies. I want to take a minute to address all the listeners thinking, yeah, I'd have lots of time to saunter too if I didn't have to do this, and this today, followed with the thought, I have no time. You're not alone in feeling like this, but why do we feel this way? Where have we gone wrong as a society to normalize having no time to take care of ourselves and to be with others? We've all felt this sense of hurriedness. Maybe we feel it right now. So to all the hurriers among us, let's start by looking at where we can slow down one step at a time, not all at once. Something that really amazed me from my trip and my reading is that by slowing down, we can actually increase our productivity. I'll say that again. By slowing down, we can actually increase our productivity. Let's look at the concept of multitasking. As humans, we can't actually focus our attention on more than one task at once, but we think we can, and so we try. When we try, what we're actually doing is attention switching, shifting our attention back and forth between one task to the next. When we experience this is called the switch cost effect. The switch cost effect is what happens when we try to refocus our attention on task A after having been distracted by task B, C, D, and so on. During the refocusing process, we're more likely to make mistakes, remember less, be less creative, and also lose interest in what we're doing. While multitasking might make us feel like we're accomplishing more, really, we're taking longer to finish a task than if we just devoted time specifically for it. When we're rushing around here and there, we're attention switching and missing what's happening right in front of us. So next time you're in the grocery store, I invite you to saunter. And while you're sauntering, you'll likely get a text, since we almost always do. Unless the message is seriously urgent, let's challenge ourselves to focus on our shopping experience and respond later when we're able to give that text conversation our full attention. And better yet, when you put your phone away, I hope you'll take time to smile at those around you, to acknowledge one another's existence. I hope we'll be better at getting out of our minds and into our bodies so that we can start reconnecting with the people who we'd otherwise anonymously pass by. Little adjustments like this can alter how we experience our days, how others experience our days, and how we all experience our lives. For those of you who've listened to episode 1 on mindfulness, you may have already connected the dots that Costa Rica, as a blue zone, values mindfulness, devotion to one experience at a time above all. And not just devotion to their experiences, enjoyment of them. I've been looking at this as a sort of slowing down to speed up. By slowing down, taking the time for themselves and their loved ones, they end up exerting more physical energy than your average North American through natural movements like dancing, walking, gardening, and doing most things by hand. I noticed that I was experiencing this type of effortless energy exertion on my trip. By saying yes to new things, making connections, and embracing the now, at the end of each day, my step counter averaged around 20,000 steps, and I'd think, when did all that happen? Something I found interesting is that people living in blue zones tend to have lower chronic stress levels, which reduces our risk for things like cardiovascular disease. These citizens still work and fulfill daily responsibilities, but by slowing down, this helps them to regulate their body and their mind. When I learned this, I was reminded of my surf experience in Costa Rica. I met Juan on Guiones Beach when he handed me a surfboard and told me, "Keep your eyes ahead." Juan works as a local surf instructor, and he spoke to me about the quote-unquote small but big joys in life, the joys that make life worth living. Juan gave up a corporate job in computer technology to pursue what really made him feel fulfilled, being out on the water. He told me that by focusing his energy on his passion above all else, the money came anyway. The risk he took switching jobs paid off financially and emotionally, as he ended up becoming part owner of the surf shop. As my friend Carrie and I made it up onto our boards for the first time, cheering and hollering for one another with grins from ear to ear, the instructor laughed as he shouted to me, "Do you see all this smiling? That's what I'm out here for." I thought to myself, he is an expander. My friend Susan tells me that she came to watch us surf that day so that she could experience what Buddhist theory calls mudita. Mudita means to experience joy and rejoicing in others' positive experiences. She too is an expander. There are two well-renowned sayings to live by in Costa Rica: Plan de vida and Pura vida. Plan de vida directly translates in English to life plan, but that's way oversimplifying it. In Costa Rica, plan de vida means to find our soul's purpose, the reason why we get out of bed every morning. In Gratitude for Pain, I talk about how we are the meaning makers of our own lives, how nothing in life inherently has meaning except that which we attribute to it. To me, this is akin to plan de vida. Finding our meaning, our purpose, is what leads us to feel pure, whole, and excited for life. This means getting in touch with ourselves, with our passions, rather than living in accordance with what we think other people expect from us. In the words of the beloved TV character Ted Lasso, it's better to follow your gut than to pretend to be excited about following someone else's. In Dan Buettner's research on the blue zones, he found that citizens are better at focusing on what they can control and surrendering the rest. By focusing on what we can control, this gives us a sense of agency and confidence to seize our days, to seize our lives. And what better way to take control of our lives than by finding and fulfilling our soul's purpose? Pura Vida translates to pure life. So what does it mean to live a pure life? In Costa Rica, Pura Vida signifies an optimistic outlook, a mindset where they're grateful for what they have, no matter how big or small. On my retreat, our host Melanie invited us to watch out for the quote-unquote glimmers in each day. Glimmers is a term coined by social worker Deb Dana, and they're micro moments of perceived beauty that positively shape our days. Melanie had us write down something we were grateful for at the end of every morning yoga class and put this little piece of gratitude, these little glimmers, into an envelope. At the end of the trip, Melanie told us that she'll be mailing these envelopes to us at random throughout the year, a gift of gratitude from ourselves. The word pure, translated from Pura Vida, stems from the Latin word purus, which means cleansed and unmixed. This reminds me of what it means to mind the gaps, to cleanse and unmix the metaphorical soup of beliefs, feelings, and thoughts swirling around in our minds and our bodies, the norms that drive how we show up day to day. Cleansing and unmixing requires curiosity about what we typically accept as facts, approaching the world with cheerful, bright, and investigative eyes to get in touch with what has always been there, but what we might be missing. Getting back to our inner childlike wonder of the world is something we can all do at any age and at any stage in our lives. On a hot afternoon in Costa Rica, Laurel and I sat by the water and talked about the concept of old souls and young souls. An old soul is a term used to describe someone who is wise beyond their years, and a young soul is meant to represent someone who has a zest, excitement, and curiosity for life, no matter how old they are. Laurel eloquently combined these two into a new term, an old young soul, someone who holds both deep-rooted wisdom and who approaches life with fresh eyes, ready to learn and be challenged. On my trip, I bonded with more old young souls than I could have imagined, and I'd say that most, if not everyone interviewed for Blue Zones research, are old and young souls too. To encompass this old young soul approach to life, we've got to let go of our limiting beliefs, the ones that hold us in our comfort zones. We've got to, as the saying goes, set fire to practices that take us away from love, that keep us from growing. When I think of Pura Vida, I think of a man who was 100 years old, otherwise known as a centenarian, when he was interviewed on the docuseries Live to 100. He gets up every morning, herds cattle, and horseback rides with the strength and speed of someone in their 20s. If you haven't seen the documentary, I highly recommend it. Nothing motivates you quite like seeing a 100-year-old horseback ride at full speed. He's truly got that "of course I can" mindset, and he's the oldest, youngest soul that I could dream up. So what's one of the most important limiting beliefs to challenge? Of course I can't. The Blue Zone secrets of slowing down, eating healthy, doing things by hand, connecting with community, and nurturing our relationship with ourselves are pretty much throwaways without truly believing, of course I can. Of course we can pursue our passion projects. Of course we can learn how to surf. Of course we can slow down in the grocery store, and of course we can become unfuckwithable. Why not? What we think about, we bring about. If we expect to fail, we will. If we expect to succeed, we will. Let's get out of our own way. Let's approach our growth zones with the excitement of a child and the wisdom of a centenarian. And let's give permission to our adult selves, no matter our current age, to let go and free fall into our gaps. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, it's always appreciated for you to follow Mind the Gaps on your podcast streaming platform and to share it with your friends and family. To stay up to date on the show, you can find me on Instagram at kirsten.davidson. Thanks for minding the gaps with me today. I'll see you next time on the journey out of our comfort zone and into our growth zone.